what is one thing that stands out to you as like an area of improvement or an area of opportunity that you saw from today's game? It's hard to do this in a win, right? Like the 49ers won, they're 4-0. I don't want to sound nitpicky, but there were some things I was like, okay, like just not that I'm worried, but like just keep an eye on it as the season goes on.
Yeah, I think people get addicted to PFF a little bit with trusting their pressure grades. By the way, PFF calls, a lot of things a pressure that I don't know if I would consider a pressure, right? And what I mean by that is like, did it really have the potential to disrupt a play? And I know that's just a win rate, things like that, but you got to remember, offenses sometimes will have these plays where. So are the 49ers getting as much pressure as PFF says they are? I think it's closer to that than people maybe see as far as they say getting off the line. I don't know if that was the problem, but yeah, it'd be nice to see them get home a little bit more. But the offenses are expecting that. I would say nitpicky Cleveland Ferrell today, multiple times crashing in and not containing. And when you have a quarterback that has mobility like Dobbs, that's an issue. And which is a big reason why I know people call him for Surtain. I have too. But this idea that having another guy that you can really trust opposite Bosa would be, I think it's going to be essential for one of those guys to really step up as the season goes on. The big thing to me is their bugaboo about you have Mooney Ward on the outside, and then you have to have had Demo Lenore on the outside because you have such a liability inside with Isaiah Oliver. And because Isaiah Oliver has played so poorly, they've had to bring Lenore inside, which he's completely capable of doing and has done a great job of. But then you have to have Ambry Thomas on the outside, and that's been a disaster. And so because of Oliver, and look, you get nitpicky, Steve Wilkes, this is soapbox a little bit. These coaches have their guys, and Isaiah, I'm not saying he said Isaiah Oliver is like a defensive MVP candidate kind of thing, but he vouched for Oliver, and Oliver's been dog water. And so when you bring Oliver in and have to put a position where you already know Ambry is not that guy on the outside, and if not for that, there's that big drive where Michael Wilson's in the end zone was all on Ambry, and then also a propensity to send pressure with Fred Warner. There was one play where Fred got hung up a little bit on a longer play, but aside from that, he was going stride for stride down the field with Hollywood Brown. Him clogging up the middle is huge. And so sending Fred up the middle, and Fred never got pressure in those situations. That to me, it needs to be mitigated. They can get pressure with force. So that's my big thing. Because if Oliver's going to struggle over the middle, the last thing you can do is bring Fred out of the middle, in my humble opinion. But that's the bugaboo, though. They couldn't get off third down. There was a time where the Cardinals were 9 of 14. I think got up to 10 of 15 on third and fourth down. You do that against the Cowboys, you're going to lose.
Yeah, it's very, very possible. There was 5 things that stood out to me. One of them, which I knew, and this is, nobody can stop this in the league, but you saw it from like a mini version of the Philadelphia Eagles. You get that tush push play coming, and there's nothing that the 49ers, nobody's going to stop it when the Eagles do it, but we know now for a fact that the 49ers also aren't going to stop it. So when that game comes around and the Eagles need short yardage, they're always going to get a first down. Like, we now know that. Like, not that there was any doubt, but we know. Okay, so that's something that we're going to have to remember when Philly comes around. Luckily, not many teams do it, and no team does it to the level that they do it. So you really only have to worry about it once in the regular season and maybe in the playoffs as well. But a couple things that stood out to me. McKivitz gave up a sack that took points off the board. So McKivitz is a guy who's been struggling really all year. This is the third time that I can remember that a defensive edge rusher was chipped and by somebody else. McKivitz was able to get fully in his stance and wait for the player to come to him and completely whiffed and gave up a sack or a pressure. It's happening way too often. It's crazy to me that a player can have that much of an advantage on the edge rusher and still lose poorly. Yeah. So that's something that stood out. Another thing that stood out to me, Ambry Thomas, you talked about it. He was picked on. As soon as he came on the field, it was like, oh, here we go. We're going straight at Ambry Thomas. They took the deep shot down the sideline, which the receiver took the inside release. I think it was Hollywood Brown. Ended up being an incompletion. They went right back to it and completed it. Then they got a touchdown right after that. Ambry Thomas on the field. Teams are going to pick on him, and deservedly so. Obviously, mobile quarterback in Dobbs. This is the first, I think, this isn't the first mobile quarterback they played because they did play Danny Dimes, but Danny Dimes had no weapons and just wasn't, the offensive line was banged up. Really, he was the only thing that the 49ers had to contain and focus on. With Dobbs, he is playing very efficient football. He has a couple other weapons around him, enough to at least make you think, and he was able to get loose. I mean, that 99-yard drive, he was freezing the 49ers. We were texting back and forth. I'm like, man, he's got them just frozen right now. There's nothing they can do about it. And then the last thing that I want to say is the special teams. This is now the second time that Moody has kicked the ball out of bounds. So I don't know if he should be kicking. Is it his third time?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I remember two for sure. I don't know that he should be kicking off. Mitch Wishnowsky did it week 1. Actually, week 1 and 2 and was fine. So maybe, just maybe, Mitch Wishnowsky should be, or excuse me, he did it week 1 only. Maybe he should be the one that's kicking the ball off. We can't have a situation where it's a tight game and this guy kicks it out of bounds and now the offense is starting at the 40-yard line. And then they had the 4th down fake punt. So special teams, not necessarily their best showing. There was some good things on special teams. Obviously, Moody was money again from the field goals. And then, I think the return game's fine for the most part, but just a couple things to point out. Is there anything that you want to add or kind of take away from what I just said?
Yeah, no, I think you're on. And I think just the comment that all defenses struggle with mobile quarterbacks. I mean, yeah, but we're talking about the 49ers. I mean, I'm not saying that it was I don't think that's actually what was the death knell for this team. But that being said, that you have to be more disciplined. There were several times where Josh Dobbs had a free run because there were on play action or on a threat of run. When you're a defensive end, and let's say you're the right end, and you've got a running play that's going to the opposite side, and you're crashing up, and then you're going left. You're not getting that guy. That play is beyond you. And I love the hustle, but your job is to contain. And Shanahan does this all the time with Brock and other players, right? That play action fake, and Dobbs bootlegged out. There were several plays where Furrow was just completely lost on that situation, and those are huge plays. Those were 2 of the plays that contributed to their 10 of 15 on 3rd and 4th down at one point, right? So I just think that there are ways to mitigate that. But no, I think everything else was spot on. My big concern, like I said, is if you're not getting pressure right away, they're going to continue to pick on the outside if you move Demo in, and they've got to figure something else out than Isaiah Oliver because it's just not working.